This is Math090 Week 4 Part 1 lecture. We'll be talking about subtraction of real numbers as well as multiplication and division of real numbers. So with subtraction, we think of it as addition of the opposite. Whenever you minus or subtract, you are actually adding the opposite. Thus, anywhere you see a subtraction symbol, you can rewrite it as plus the negative of whatever that number is. Back in grade school, when you learned how to subtract, we easily subtracted 4 minus 1 and got 3. This is because 4 minus 1 is the same as 4 plus negative 1, which we learned when you're adding two numbers with opposite signs. You take the difference between the numbers. The difference between 4 and 1 is 3. Then you give it the sign of the larger of the two values. The 4 is the larger and it's positive. So back when you learned minusing or subtraction, you were actually learning how to add the opposite. Looking at our problem here, we have negative 4 plus 9 minus 6. We can easily rewrite that as negative 4 plus 9 plus a negative 6. Then, if we start on the left, negative 4 plus 9 gives us a positive 5. The difference between 4 and 9 is 5. 9 is positive, so your 5 is positive. So we have 5 plus the opposite of 6. Well, the difference between 5 and 6 is 1. But in this case, 6 has the negative number, so your outcome would be a negative 1. Now it works the same with fractions. The only thing you have to remember is when you're adding, subtracting fractions, you need the common denominator. So you can rewrite these again as addition of the opposite. So we have negative 8/9 and a minus 2/3. And we'll rewrite that as negative 8/9 plus a negative 2/3. So we need a common denominator. If we think about multiples, 9 is already a multiple of 3. So 9 is going to be your common denominator. So we don't have to do anything to the 8/9, but your negative 2/3 needs to have the denominator of 9. So we had to multiply by 3. So therefore, if we multiply by 3 here, 2 times 3 is 6. So we're actually adding the opposite of 6/9. So now we're adding two numbers with the same sign. Negative 8 plus a negative 6 is a negative 14, and we keep the denominator of 9. Okay, so we deal with these negative numbers because sometimes you deal with temperatures, or as in this problem, we deal with altitudes. Altitudes are above and below sea level. Sea level is considered 0 altitude. Above sea level is positive, below sea level is negative. So Ravi is riding in a bicycle race that goes through a valley. The table gives the altitudes for the 5 checkpoints. The top of a hill rises 162 feet above checkpoint 2. What is the altitude of the top of the hill? So checkpoint 2 is at negative 187 feet. And we need to go above that checkpoint, 162 feet. So we're taking the negative 187 and we're adding 162. The negative 187 plus the 162 adding two numbers with opposite signs, you take the difference between 187 and 162. The difference is 25, and we give it the sign of the 187. So if you think about it, if we are at, let's say this is sea level, and we're at 187 feet below sea level, and we go, so this is below sea level. If we go up 162 feet, we're still going to be below sea level, right? The 162 isn't enough to bring the 187 back up to 0, so you're still below sea level. So here, we're still 25 feet below sea level. Now the second part of this question, how much lower is checkpoint 2 than checkpoint 1? So checkpoint 1 is above sea level. Checkpoint 2 is below sea level. So when we are finding, here we're finding the difference between the two checkpoints. Difference is subtraction. So we want to know the difference between checkpoint 1 and checkpoint 2. Checkpoint 1 is 3,352 feet, and we're going to subtract checkpoint 2. So now we are actually subtracting a negative number. And remember, subtraction is addition of the opposite. So this first minus sign becomes plus the opposite. Well, what is the opposite of a negative number but a positive number? So 3,352 minus a negative 187 is the same thing as 3,352 plus the opposite of negative 187. Well, the opposite of negative 187 is positive 187. So you're actually adding these two numbers. So if you think about it, checkpoint 1 is 3,352 feet above sea level. To get down to checkpoint 2, you'd have to go down 3,352 feet just to get to sea level. Then you'd have to go down another 187 feet to get to negative 187. So if we're way up here, 3,352, and this is sea level, well then we have to go down to 0. So that's automatically 3,352 feet. Then we have to go down the 187 more feet to give us the grand total of the 3,539 feet. Okay, so multiplication and division of real numbers. There are two things to remember. If you're multiplying or dividing the same sign, if you're multiplying two positives or two negatives, if you're dividing two positives or two negatives, your outcome will always be positive. Now, if you're multiplying or dividing two numbers with opposite signs, meaning one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative, your outcome will always be negative. So, looking at this problem, negative 40 divided by 8. Well, we know 40 divided by 8 is 5. We have opposite signs, so this means we're going to have a negative outcome. So our 5 is going to be negative. Multiplying 4 times 5 we know is 20. Both of our numbers are negative, and remember rule 1, if they're both positive, both negative, the outcome is always positive. So negative 4 times negative 5 is a positive 20. Negative 40 divided by a positive 8 is going to be a negative 5. So just like 2 times 5 is 10, negative 2 times negative 5 is going to be 10 as well. Same signs, multiplying same signs gets you positive. Dividing 10 divided by 5 is a positive 2. Negative 10 divided by negative 5 is also a positive 2. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Right? Different signs gives us a negative outcome. Negative 10 divided by a positive 5 gives us a negative 2. Okay, so if you're multiplying or dividing same sign, your answer is positive. Multiplying or dividing different signs, your answer is negative. So there's some special rules when you involve 0. We can divide 0. So you can take 0 and we can divide 0. If you take 0 and divide it by any number in the world, your outcome will always be 0. 0 divided by 10 is 0. 0 divided by 20 is 0. 0 divided by 532 is 0. But you cannot divide by 0. If you have any number, 5 divided by 0 is undefined. 99 divided by 0 is undefined. You can divide 0, but you cannot divide by 0. Therefore, the first problem here, 2 over 0. Remember, a fraction bar also means division. This is the same as saying 2 divided by 0. Well, looking at our rule, we cannot divide by 0, so this would be undefined. Now, our other problem, 0 divided by 7, we can divide 0. We just cannot divide by 0. 0 divided by any number will always be 0. And that is the end of week 4, part 1 lecture.